What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the Straight Facts YouTube channel. It's your boy, Jimmy J. And again, I told you this was going to be a reoccurring series because we're getting ready for the NFL draft coming up in a little less than 2 weeks. So we got to come back and tap in with the Straight Facts NFL draft analyst, former writer for Pro Football Network, my guy, Matt V, here to break down on yet another position group for the people, man. What you got for us today?
Hey, today we're doing the running backs, sticking with the ones the fans want to talk about. We had wide receivers last time. For the running backs, we know everyone wants to find out who the next Derrick Henry is, the next Christian McCaffrey. So we're going to get into some of these guys, and some of them are some fun prospects, so I'm excited to talk about.
Yeah, some of these guys that you've known about for a couple of years now in college football, right, haven't just come onto the scene this year. So I know in a lot of years, right, the running back position is, a dime a dozen. There's few and far in between. There's always a drop off. Are we looking, before we get into the weeds, are we looking at that again? Is it like top heavy and then you can wait till the 5th round to get your next running back? Or is it something like, hey, we're going to see people go?
Yeah, people who follow me know that for a long time I've been pointing out how the position has really been devalued by the NFL and everything in general, just because it's so easy to produce from that position with, a mediocre talent. You don't need an elite guy to have an effective rush offense. And most of that comes from the fact that offensive line, quarterback play, schematics, all of that goes into how efficient your running game is going to be. That when so many variables are taken out of the running back's hand, it's just not as impactful on how good that player has to be. But today, there are some guys who I think really have an ability that, could become one of the next premier running backs in the league. I think there's maybe 3 or 4 guys in that possibility. But I think after that, you do see, 10 to 15 guys who are, you can take anywhere. Teams aren't going to be rushing to take guys in round 3 after the elite guys go, just because I think you're really getting a lot of value from anyone you take.
Right.
And also with running backs, it's so specific and it's so niche to everyone that one person's, top tier 2 running back might not be in someone's day 2 grades or, early day 3 grades at all, while someone else could view another running back very highly. So I think that's also in part of it.
Right. When you stop getting, when you get away from these guys are just generational talents and you start getting into guys who specify in the different areas, not every team needs
what do
those
you need?
Specific traits. Right. Okay, man. Well, you got 10 for us. So let's break them down then. Let's see what's going on with these running backs.
We do have 10. First, I just want to give an honorable mention, a little 11th, to Arizona State's Rachaad White. Very aggressive runner. Just want to, make sure that his name is at least brought up so that the people know that I'm a fan. But number 10 is kind of like the consummate number 10, the guy that I kind of view him as, if you need a back because you just need to add someone to your running back room, this is kind of the guy you're targeting. Alabama's Brian Robinson Jr. Finally took the stage as the team's number 1 back this year. It's just that the team went a very offense or a very pass heavy style with Bill O'Brien, so the production was dropped down a little bit. Robinson spent a lot of his career playing second fiddle to Najee Harris, but he's well coached and developed, as an Alabama player. He's a very tough runner, and his motor runs nonstop, going to fight for every yard. He's going to be a guy that your coaches and your teammates are going to love him. They're going to love the way he runs, not giving you a ton as a pass catcher, not giving you a ton as an athlete, but just a guy who's really going to hit the right hole and hit it really hard, and he's just going to nonstop run for you.
I mean, I was about to say, if we know anything about these Alabama running backs, they're tough runners, right? Like they will get up in between the tackles and run behind their pads. Robinson Jr. is just another example of that.
Yep, and he's going to come in and he'll probably never be your lead back, but he's a great role player to have, a great guy who's going to tough out some tough yards for you. But moving on to number 9, we're going to go over to Florida State for Jashaun Corbin, someone who I'm a big fan of, a bigger fan than the consensus seems to be. I think he's a very, very tough runner. I think when you take into account what he did at Florida State with how little he had to work with, very similar situation to what Cam Akers was put into, and some people really, really loved Akers. I think Akers is a better athlete than Corbin is, but I think Corbin's a more physical runner. He's really, really nasty, fights for the tough yards. They really love to go to him as a wildcat quarterback on 4th and 2, give him the ball, let him pick his hole and go fight for those yards. He was really, really good at that. And he had 12 rushing touchdowns and 20 career starts at Florida State. He transferred from Texas A&M earlier in his career. But just a dude who's a really productive guy. I think he's going to bounce off of some of the more dynamic running backs really, really well, and he's going to churn out those hard yards for a team.
I like a dude who can assimilate into a creative offense because the NFL is full
Yep,
of creative offenses now. Now, am I expecting him to go into a wildcat in the NFL? No, but the fact that he can move positions and was still effective just shows that you're not new to getting a little outside of the box.
exactly,
In the
for
NFL,
sure.
depending on who you go to, we gonna get outside of the box
Yeah, and you see
in the
teams like
NFL.
San Francisco do that a lot. Guys who
Right,
aren't elite running back talents, but put them in situations to go pick up some yards. I think Corbin could really fit in that. He's a guy who
right.
he raises the floor of a rushing offense, right? He's not going to raise the ceiling. He's not going to give you 2,000 yards ever, but he's the guy who you can hand off the ball. And even if he doesn't hit the right hole, he's going to run hard. He's going to pick you up 2, 3, 4 yards. He
Mhm.
just gets those tough little yards that maybe other running backs aren't picking up.
Now, I was just about to say that you said he'll never give you 2,000 yards, or you won't expect him to give you 2,000 yards
Yep.
in a season. Now, the numbers don't pop off the screen when you look at his numbers in his
Yep.
career. They're productive, but they're not anything like whoa, high first round pick or anything like that. But I know Florida State hasn't been the best program in the past,
Exactly.
5 to 10 years ever since they Jameis
Yep. It's not
Winston
the
graduated.
Dalvin Cook Florida State. He's not playing
Does
with the
he
elite offensive line.
now? Does he get a pass for that? Does he or does he get kind of points for that? Do we understand that he was such in a bad offense, or does that not go into, or does that not factor into this whole thing?
No, he absolutely is getting points for that. It was the reason I was so high on Cam Akers, and I think it's because you see a guy like this in such a terrible situation, right? And I understand everyone wants to be like, oh, Florida State, they're going to get this. Like, that offensive line has been really, really bad for a really, really long time. And
Mhm.
Corbett still found ways to produce offense for himself, still managed to produce yards, and people thought, oh, well, people were low on Cam Akers for the same idea. Oh, he wasn't as productive. He couldn't carry Florida State, stuff like that. But I took it as, when I was watching Cam Akers, it was like, this dude's creating a lot of yards that aren't there for him. And I think
Mm.
Corbin has some of that dog in him too.
Awesome. I like that. I like that.
Moving on next, we've got Jarrion Ely out of Ole Miss. Fun fact about this dude, was also drafted to the MLB. So minor, he wasn't like the 5th overall pick. So we're not going to get into like a hard Kyler Murray
Oh yeah. Or is he going to
situation.
baseball, or is he going
Nah,
football situation? Right.
I do anticipate he'll be playing football, but you never know. People told me that Kyler was never going to play football, so who knows?
Right.
But Ely's super patient and decisive runner. He picks his holes. He waits for them to develop. Smaller body, so he kind of has to. He's not going to ever be a workload guy, but kind of the prototypical change of pace. Even though he's not super, super explosive or athletic, he's changing at which the tempo that the rush offense is dictating, especially at the line of scrimmage. I think his ability to just weave his way through traffic very smoothly and efficiently is very effective, and it's going to get him places in the NFL. He's not super dynamic. He's not shady. He's not cutting on a dime, but it's a more fluid transition between spots and staying the one speed. So it looks like he's almost like running water moving through the defense. That's kind of how it looked to me. And so I'm another guy that I'm very high on, just because he'll never be a guy that you're going to give the ball to 250 times and kind of put the back of your offense on. But he's a guy that naturally picks up yards. He's a guy who brings value as a returner and a receiver as well. Scored as both of those in college at Ole Miss. So he's a guy who's just a multifaceted back who I think picks up yardage very smoothly and easily, and that's a valuable skill to have.
So when you say he runs smoothly, and I'm in no means comparing him to this next player, I don't want people to think that I'm making a leap. But when you say run smoothly like that, the person I think is Alvin Kamara. Kind of runs like it almost looks
Glides almost.
effortlessly, glides.
Yep.
Now, is that the kind of running style you're comparing him to?
Close
not
to
the magnitude of it.
Yeah, close, and kind of like what a Le'Veon did as well with his
same
ability to
kind of
just
thing, yeah.
slide through.
Yep.
I think Kamara's probably a little more explosive in his own ability to force defenders to miss, because he can move laterally if he needs to. But in the way that he navigates through traffic, I definitely could see it a little bit.
Okay. So that was number 8. We're going to number 7 now for our draft board.
Number 7, we're gonna go back to Florida, and we've got Damian Pierce. Now, this is a guy who did not produce very much at Florida, and was a little bit of a knock on him because he was a very highly touted recruit coming out. But Florida did a lot, especially when Kyle Trask was there. They threw the ball a lot more than they had in their career, or in what they have typically done. So Damien Pierce kind of played back up to that. But dude is a huge body, very, very nasty, very physical runner, very muscular. He played He's a willing blocker, which is my favorite thing, not just in pass protection. He will line up in the I form as the fullback, and he will be more than willing to lead block, open up some holes. I think he's the perfect complement back to maybe a guy like a Kamara or a guy like a CMC. He's a dude you want to tough out, churn out those tough yards. I know we said that a couple of times, but a guy who's going to in between the tackles, just to take some of that pressure and that weight off of your superstar back. And Pierce's body is built to take it. He's the perfect pseudo fullback that we move to. And I think a lot of the young offensive coordinators in the league, or even the young head coaches, the offensive progressive head coaches like a Mike McDaniels or, Sean McVay or Shanahan, I think could really, really be a fan of his tool set, because he's going to play off what they really, really love to do well. But he's going to give you a more explosive runner, a more dynamic runner than a typical fullback would give you.
I think calling him a compliment back at this stage, if he's, number 7 on your board, is one of the best compliments you could get as a running back, because if you add so much value to the team you're going through. Look at a guy like an Alvin Kamara, CMC. The last 2 years, both of those guys have struggled to stay healthy.
Yep.
You take the tough yards away from, 2 running backs like that, and look what they can do when they can just get the ball in space or get the ball in stretch plays. But, let's not overlook Damian Pierce, even though he didn't have the craziest workload, still led, the FBS with a 93.5 rushing grade, I believe, this past season. So he's shown the ability to produce on a top tier team like Florida. Like, I just don't think you can, it is what it looks like when he's a good running back on an SEC team that's competing.
He's going to be exactly.
It is what it looks like.
And I mean, there's a reason that a lot of these guys on this list are SEC players, right? They're seeing NFL defensive linemen, they're running behind offensive linemen. And I think, like you said, with Pierce, just the perfect complement back to those guys, really has that skill set between being a power back, but also being such a willing blocker, that I really do think he plays that perfect complement role, where even though he's not giving you anything as a receiver, you can still have a 2-back set with him and a guy like a Kamara or a CMC or whoever you would want, and it would still work really, really well. Or even a team like Washington with a Gibson and a McKissick, 2 guys who are former receivers, even that would make sense, right? Just someone to be that beef, that workload kind of guy, but isn't the entirety of your offense, right? He's never going to be Derrick Henry. He's never going to be Najee Harris. So you can't give him those numbers of carries, because he's just not the dynamic athlete. But that role that he would fill would be, really strong.
The guy that comes to mind, and he terrorized my team, 2 years ago in our Super Bowl one, AJ Dillon with the Packers. Like,
would make sense.
Just let's line up and just, he may not be able to run past you or juke you out, but what he can, just line up and punch you in the mouth. And you go think twice about trying to tackle him again. That's all I'm going to say. You're going to think twice about trying to tackle him.
And that's a really good, especially when they had Aaron Jones there. That's a
perfect 1-2 combo. Yeah, they were killing the league. But all right, we're down to number 6 now.
Moving on, and so this is going to be the last of the kind of like specific running backs, right? The guys who aren't going to be lead backs, and this is going to be James Cook out of Georgia. Those who watch the college football playoffs know James Cook. He's the younger brother of Dalvin, kind of that prototypical third down, smaller but electric athlete. You want to get him.
Like him.
Exactly.
Just like
Dalvin, a little bit thicker, a little bit bigger, so he gets, he can be that lead back. I think James Cook is going to be in that third down back type of mold at the NFL level, but I think he's got the potential to be, the best guy, right? I think he's got the potential to be someone who threatens for 100 receptions in a season. He's got a guy who's so dynamic when he has the ball in his hands. He's always a threat to score. You want to try and get mismatches for him, and I think he's just the opposite of Damian Pierce, right? If you have a guy like a Derrick Henry, if you have a guy like a Jonathan Taylor, even though the Colts already have their Naheem Hines, this is what James Cook would do. He would fill in that role to be a pass catcher, a change of pace, someone to, take your workhorse off, and the defense is so used to this beating, and then all of a sudden you have a running back who's faster than everyone else that they've been playing against so far. So I think James Cook also fills in a role really, really nicely. He's going to be another niche running back. It's just going to be whatever team feels they need that role. That's when he'll go off the board. And so I do think that he's got a high ceiling for someone who's not going to be a full-time player. I think that's why Pierce and Cook are so intriguing to me, because as guys, their skill sets are so strong that even though I know they're never going to be a running back that I am going to call on every play to put my offense on their back, there are guys whose ceilings are so high in their individual role that I could see them being one of the better backs in the NFL, what they do.
Yeah, bloodline strong with this one, man. If
True.
I know your older brother, Dalvin Cook, I knew you got something in it. And when I say their running styles are similar, he runs just like him. When I'm watching the college football playoff, the way I describe both their running styles, straight line runners, A to B runners, not too much dancing,
Explosive.
not
Yeah.
not too much messing around, especially when they get in the hole. They find a hole and they will get through
Let me
it.
run past you.
Yeah, lightning quick, and just like you said, just run past everyone. He's got that ability in them. He gets a little bit more explosive like his brother, and we might be looking at a rushing yards leader like his brother. Like
That would be
that's all I'm saying
crazy.
is
Would be crazy.
I mean I saw it. I saw it in him. Now I'm not the expert like you, Matt V, but I can when I see it, I'll be like, hey man, that boy runs just like his brother. I know what his brother can do.
Yeah, and he's easy to watch and really, really fall in love with just how explosive and the plays that he was making, especially in the college football playoffs.
Center stage, man. When you do it on center stage, you show people things. Top
five things, and these are all going to be guys that I think have good potential to be a full-time workhorse back in the NFL. That you can draft them and be like, okay, here's 250 carries, and they will produce for you.
Right.
Number 5 is going to be Pierre Strong out of South Dakota State. The reason he's going to come in at number 5, big reason, smallest school, right? The level of competition just wasn't the best. He dominated the level of competition. Don't get that twisted, but just not on this. He just wasn't facing the same level guys that a lot of these other dudes were. Now, when it came to testing, he did test like an NFL athlete. He was probably the best testing running back that we had. Came in, filled out, looked really, really powerful, and then also came in around, I want to say like a 4.39 or maybe lower. Super productive at SDSU for pretty much the majority of his career. Has the upside to really be an every down runner. Has the power, the breakaway speed. The vision's lacking. There's still going to need to be development in terms of waiting for his holes to open up and letting his blocking scheme. He kind of just wants to see where he's supposed to go and go. That works for you at SDSU, probably would have worked for him at any other school in the country. In the NFL, that doesn't work, so he's going to have to clean that up and let his blocks play out for him. But he's also going to get better blocking at the NFL level than he got at SDSU. He does show talent in finding cutback lanes, which is good, so his vision's not a total L. There's stuff to work with. You can get him moving one side and let a cutback lane open up kind of naturally, and that's kind of taking the decision out of his hands.
Right.
To an extent, and just letting him feel for where the opening will go. But in terms of the tools, I think this is the guy who maybe you get the steal of the draft if he's the last one there. I'm sure teams are starting to feel this way too, but maybe you do get a full-time back at the beginning of the 4th round or at the very end of the 3rd round because, a smaller school back, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get. And I think that he's going to provide a lot of value to whatever team would get him potentially in that area.
I expected to hear Pierre Strong's name a lot sooner. I'm not going to lie to you, man. I've seen him hovering. I think the farthest I've seen him up is about 7 on some boards, but he hovers around the 8, 9, 10 range, ladder of the top 10. Are you looking at his upside and saying like his ups? Like, are you banking or are you betting on his upside, and that's why he's top 5 for you?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think the running backs that other people would have ahead of him probably aren't meant to be full-time guys or don't have that in their projection, like a Damien Pierce or a James Cook. For me, if I'm drafting a running back in the top 5 of their position, is because I'm taking a guy that I want to be my full-time back, and I think Strong fills that profile better than any of the remaining rushers.
Gotcha. Okay. Just how I got the method to the madness, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know why he's up there.
The thing with James Cook or Pierce, right? I wouldn't necessarily want to draft. I wouldn't want my running back 5 to be a specified role guy. Now,
right.
I have no real problem with anyone who does have that. That's just how I'm perceiving it. If I'm taking the running back position, I need maximum value from that position.
Right. Remember, y'all, when Matt V does this, he is putting himself in the mind of an NFL GM. If I was an NFL GM, why would I make this pick, or who would I pick and why? So
exactly.
He's putting himself in a professional mindset. So
and if I was a GM, I had my own team, right? Then I would have a better understanding of what my roster looks like. And then maybe I would prefer a James Cook or I would prefer a Damien Pierce because I need that role player. But in terms of just how I'm looking at it right now, I don't have anyone on my roster. This is
right. I need a running back. Yeah, exactly. I need a running back. All right, number 4.
Number 4, Kyron Williams out of Notre Dame.
There he is.
As long as you've watched any college football, you are very well aware of who this is. Decent, argument that Kyron was the best running back in the country in NCAA his sophomore year. And so I don't necessarily think he fell off or anything like that. I never thought that he was going to be the best running back in the class, but super, super productive. And in terms of, career arc, the most productive and dynamic career in the class. Like I said, probably the best rusher in college as a sophomore. Super, super well-rounded skill set. Moves kind of smoothly, like we talked about Jarrion Ely, with a little more dynamism. That's right.
That's a word.
But he can operate with multiple rush schemes. He brings some value as a pass catcher. He doesn't really have super high-end traits. He's not an elite athlete. He's not real big. Just the kind of well-formed, all-around guy that you can put in whatever run scheme. If you want to run the wide zone, if you want to run power, if you want to run ISO, whatever floats your boat, Kyron can do. He can do pretty well. His ceiling's a little limited because of those lack of traits, but I do think that if I see, looking at any of these running backs and having to put them in any situation, I would probably feel the best about him being put into any situation and finding a way to produce.
Yeah, I mean, he's just like the Notre Dame helmet, right? He's just well polished, and that's okay.
Exactly.
For taking him, number 4 or having him slated number 4. But he did end 2021 just on a straight tear, right? Like 14 touchdowns over the last 8 games, 58 broken tackles, 204 carries. I mean, he was a man possessed to end the year. So you have this crazy sophomore year, and like you said, not a fall off, but maybe a plateau. Like we're not seeing the arc go up, and then all of a sudden in the last 8 games it skyrockets, and then now, Kyron Williams,
now he's back in that.
He's back on the scene. He's back in the mix, and it's what we thought it was going to be.
And if you follow the arc, it was very much, sophomore year, oh, this is the best running back in the class. And then, Breece Hall and Isaiah Spiller did their things. And then all 3 of them, to be honest, kind of started to plateau. And the only one who did a ton for them this season was Kenneth Walker. And we'll talk about all 3 of these next guys here in a bit.
Right.
But yeah, Kyron Williams, the only other thing I want to mention, there are some fumbling issues. One thing that you got to be a little wary of as a team, but still, I think a jump up from the rest of the runners. And I think the top 4 is the clear tier 1.
There you go. You mentioned the 3. I was going to say, you mentioned the 3. Let's put them in order now.
So number 3 is going to be Isaiah Spiller out of Texas A&M. Originally, for a while, I thought this dude was going to be my RB1. As a true freshman, I remember him blowing up on the scene in like week 2. I think he had like a 200-yard game or something. And right there, I was like, oh, yeah, that dude's going to be an NFL player. And he did not disappoint for the rest of his career. Violent runner, will take your soul running you over in front of everyone you love, has no problem with it. Super willing to engage contact and force his way through like congested areas. Produced early and consistently throughout his career at Texas A&M. Just as a freshman, like I said, recorded 946 yards. Then after that, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Super patient in terms of he lets the blocking scheme come to him. And the only really big issue that I have with him is just an obvious lack of high-end speed. I think everyone we've talked about on this list, besides probably Damien Pierce and maybe Jashaun Corbin, are probably better athletes than Spiller. But between his big frame, his super, super aggressive running style, also has very, very soft hands, exhibited an ability to catch balls away from his frame, understand where his body is in terms of the sideline, a very, very advanced catcher, not a super advanced route runner, but has a feel to where the ball is, where his body is, and where his hands should be when the ball's in the air. And that's a great trait to have for a running back. Just it's a natural thing that you can't really teach. And so I appreciate that. Just made a number of career catches that even a lot of wide receivers would have dropped. So you do have value as a pass catcher. You're not going to get some Christian McCaffrey running a whole route tree out of the backfield. But, you have a dump-off guy who that if your quarterback gives him a bad throw, he still probably has a good chance of coming down with it.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if a big man that can catch the ball, I got to give you some points for that, man.
He's like a watered-down Najee. He's like a watered-down Najee Harris.
Hey, if you're a Kmart Najee Harris, there are worse things. There are
way worse things to be because I loved Najee.
Yeah, but here's the thing: if you have him slated number 3, then that means he's probably going to not that great of a team. If you're not going to not that great of a team, might not have that great of an offensive line. You can, if you're okay with contact, if you don't shy away from contact, you may be able to make your own hole sometimes. And offensive linemen, vouch for me as a former offensive lineman. I'm sure that you love nothing more than a running back who can create his own hole sometimes.
Create his own yardage, absolutely.
Yeah, it might not be there. If you can yards after contact or just be able to absorb contact, fall forward for an extra yard or 2, that helps us as an offense.
Yeah, and then luckily for running backs, it's not so bad like quarterbacks or edge rushers where if you're a great player, you're one of the three best players at your position, you're going to go to a bad team.
Right.
Running back, we could see not one running back go in the first round, right? And I don't think anyone would be overly shocked. So maybe he gets lucky. First two running backs come off the board in the early second, and all of a sudden you're playing for a playoff team, right? You never know. But with that, you could also get drafted by the Patriots and are in purgatory for the rest of your career.
Yeah, exactly. So, you're in a running back room of five different running backs sharing the ball. Right. I mean, if you ask any fantasy draft owners out there, they will tell you do not take a running back in the first round.
So.
Never take a running back in the first round. All right, top two, man. Who's two?
Number 2, Kenneth Walker out of Michigan State.
Number 2. Okay.
This season's RB1 for sure. Had the best year of any of the running backs. I think for me, there's the difference with him and Breece Hall comes in the upside. I think that it makes sense if you consider Kenneth Walker the best running back in the class at this moment. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with you. Super explosive runner with a huge frame, very, very thick. People like to say he grew up in the weight room. You can tell. Good long speed, which is something you don't get in the other violent runners, right? Isaiah Spiller, Damian Pierce are guys we have talked about with big bodies and are aggressive in their running style. Kenneth Walker, to me, is the only one that combines that with the ability to break away. That's why he comes in at number 2 above above Spiller. And with Walker, I think you get some of that like Derrick Henry, hit the line super, super hard, be one of the biggest dudes on the field, and still be able to run away from everyone. And so that's where a lot of people are seeing it and are like, okay, this is what we want. This is what we need. And I understand that. To me, wanting a running back who's going to be able to force himself through congested issues and still be able to break away and get you points, like that's a big value to have. Hyper productive this past season, but wasn't prior, transferred from Wake Forest. So there's some pause there as to why. Obviously, when he showed on film, it's probably a Wake Forest's fault as opposed to Kenneth Walker's fault, but it's something to, keep in the eval. He's patient, allows the opportunities. This is something Michigan State does really, really well, is developing their running backs. It's similar to what we saw with Le'Veon, reading behind the line, letting things get into motion before he picks his hole and hits it. The biggest issue that I have with him is the lack of third down potential that he brings. Not a super willing blocker, not a good blocker, and not a great receiver either. So are you really only drafting a first and second down weapon? First, second, and short down situation weapon? I don't know. Tennessee's made it work with Derrick Henry, but is Kenneth Walker going to be on the level of Derrick Henry? Probably not. So it's hard to evaluate what that weight is worth, or what a player who can only come out on those two downs or those type of situations is worth. But strong frame, easily runs through poor tackle attempts. You really have to square him up to get him onto the ground. He creates yardage for people. So I could definitely see a team viewing him very highly. Could see him go as early as the late first. I don't view him as high, but.
Hey man, I think this one, the reward is worth the risk, in my opinion. I hear all the cons on him and they show up on film, but what also shows up on film is probably, to me, just the eye test, the most home run plays in that span at college football. Between him and the next running back that you're going to talk about who went number 1, those two probably are combined for the most home run plays I saw in their time in college football. And there's a reason for that. You talk about getting up into congested spaces and making your way out. Led college football in broken tackles, and I believe he had like 20 against Miami alone, just in one game, in a final game at Michigan State. So just the ability, to get away from it. It's nuts, right?
It's wild. Yeah, watching that film was insane. It was like watching Derrick Henry.
It was watching a Madden game. Like, no way he's breaking all these tackles. Like, it's just effortless the way he started to break tackles, and it looked like he got into a rhythm, one of those game breaker modes in video games where, like, it's just an automatic. This next animation is going to make you miss.
Watch my takeover.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. And it's so eye-popping that and when you do that, there's not many opportunities for a pass blocking situation. There's not many opportunities for catching a ball at the backfield, because every time I give it to you, it's 5 to 10 to 15 yards a pop. I mean, I'm just going to give it to you again.
And that sets up your play action, and then from there.
So as he has to do it more, hopefully he gets better at it. But I can't imagine there was a huge sample size of having to do that because you're the superstar running back.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely correct. There really wasn't. Michigan didn't ask him to do a ton. They asked him to do what he did, and he did it well.
Yeah, gotta do it. All right, man. Unveil it. Number one.
Number one, Iowa State's Brees Hall.
Gotta be. Gotta be.
He's been my RB1 for a little while now. He's got the most productive career of the top backs. He's a multifaceted weapon for Iowa State over the course of his career. He's got a good frame. He switches gears pretty easily. He's got long speed. You know, it's not elite long speed, but it's enough to work in my opinion. His acceleration is more than adequate. I think he's a patient runner. Again, he understands blocking schemes really, really well. I think Kenneth Walker can sometimes, you know, he's patient, but sometimes he'll get past the hole. I think Brees Hall probably in terms of overall vision is the best of the top guys, except for maybe Spiller. Spiller's so good. He just doesn't have that elite gear. But Brees Hall, you're getting the most dynamic two-way player in terms of an elite, I think can be a workhorse back to put your rushing offense, to carry the weight of your rushing offense, also provides you value as a receiver, soft hands. The only pause I have with him as a receiver is that he had elite receiving production, but it was by pedestrian means. So it was a lot of like swings, a lot of screens, a lot of just basic stuff you ask of running backs. But there were times where he exhibited a little bit more. And I think that's an area to improve on. And I think his proof of consistency, catching those screen passes, those swing passes, everything like that, is indicative of his hands overall and his ability as a receiver. And so I think with Brees Hall, he's the only running back you're drafting where you're getting, you know, the potential of having a true multifaceted RB1.
Yeah. I wouldn't say this is the craziest running back class or the strongest one we've seen
not at all
in a while. These top two, maybe these top three are the big home run ones, like you alluded to in the beginning of the video. But you look at Brees Hall just on paper, 6'1", 220. And the boy can still move. Like they're just built like an NFL running back, has an NFL body and sneaky speed. And I think that's a great trait to have in the open field. I think you're splitting hairs between him and Kenneth Walker, who you decide is number one, number two. But I mean, I don't blame you at all for putting Brees Hall number one. Like I said with Kenneth Walker, him and Kenneth Walker had the most home run plays I've seen in college football in their time. Brees Hall is an amazing running back, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Both guys, I mean, you really can't go wrong. It's just depending on what you're looking for, what your offense is built to do. Either way, I think teams will be happy.
All right. So that wraps up the running backs, man. We got three position groups down: the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, now the running backs. I won't even spill the beans as to what you're gonna do next. You guys gotta come back to the Straight Facts YouTube channel and watch Matt V break it down. Matt V, thank you so much again, man. What you gotta say to the people to wrap it up one more time?
And make sure y'all follow me on Twitter. We just hit that 5,000 mark.
Let's do
NBA draft coming up soon. I promise you're going to want to see me talk about it. But it's a good time. I appreciate y'all for listening. It's always for watching. It's always a vibe.
It's always a vibe, man. What they gonna do with Ja, man? They gonna give Ja most improved?
They better. Ja or Desmond. Listen, if they're like, oh, Ja's too good for most improved, they better give it to Desmond then.
All right, y'all. This was an NFL draft episode, so we'll keep it. We don't got time to get in this whole debate right now. But Matt V, thanks for dropping by again. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to the Straight Facts YouTube channel. We're giving you all the facts all the time. We'll see you guys next time.